Ron, thank you for joining me today. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, it's funny. We're talking a little bit off the offline on this, just about all these kind of like connections through various different parts of LO, but we're finally like I was telling you, I've known of you for God knows how long now. But
Yeah,
finally meeting over this.
yeah.
So yeah, just to start off though, can you just talk about like what years did you go to LOSD or like a sort of school district?
Um, I was there from first grade through graduating high school. So, um, I guess I graduated in 2009. So I'm trying to think of what the equivalent of, I guess yeah, since 96, I guess was, yeah, 96 through
Mm.
2009.
Yeah, where's your family before LO?
They just bounced around, like Tiger, Tualatin, um, and yeah, I mean my mom is from Lake Oswego, and so yeah, we bounced around just a bunch of different rentals, like all around Lake Oswego, Tualatin, Tiger area. I
Mm.
think southeast a little bit.
Yeah, was I know with like my family, a big emphasis on just like choosing LO was the schools. I'm curious if
Yeah,
it was
exactly.
similar for you.
Yeah, yeah, it was definitely the schools, because my family was not rich by any
Mhm.
means, so it was definitely like, oh well, I guess we're moving on to the next rental. On the other, we're going Lake Grove to downtown LO and back and forth.
Mm. And a big theme of all this is kind of like community.
Mhm.
And I'm curious as far as like just were there places either in LO or I think for a lot of people it's often outside of LO, but where'd you go for community just growing up?
Um, I I feel like I didn't even really know what community was till I got out of Lake Oswego,
Mhm.
in like what actual like community is, where you feel like you're around people that you know have your best interest in mind and want to relate to you. So like I had friends in Lake Oswego, and coincidentally, it was like kids when growing up. I was like, coincidentally, I was drawn to the brown and the people of color and shit, and like just coincidentally happened to be like, oh, all the Asians found each other, whatever,
Mm.
the non-white people found each other, and yeah, but I didn't really understand what it was like to like be a part of a group that I felt like I belonged to, like got out of like Oswego. And I've kept in touch with, like, I still have some of my best friends or people that I like, met in junior high or what elementary school and stuff. But for the most part, it's like I didn't even know how to be a part of a community till I got out of like Oswego.
Oh, that's a very fascinating point. I want to definitely return and dig into that, but can you just talk a little bit about like what your experience was like in LO schools?
Um it was it was interesting. I mean, like, I think that I, like anybody, just wanted to fit in ways, but like I knew I was different too. So there was like, because like, and in my personal immediate family, I wasn't around, all my siblings were white, they had different dad and stuff. So like I was the only brown person in my family, on top of like being in Lake Oswego. So uh just like kids at school had no idea like where Laos was, or like what Laotian people are like. And so like I feel like it was like people aired on the side more of like kind of like erasing my brownness, or being different, and tried to just kind of, like, I felt like I just kind of would, the only way I'd fit in was if I was just doing shit that everyone else was doing, like try to play the same sports or whatever, those things. And in the schools, like, I remember teachers at times saying things that I knew wasn't right, but I didn't have any other people directly around me to like corroborate, like, that was fucked up what they said. It's kind of, that was a lot of it up until I got into high school and like kind of learned more shit and was more comfortable kind of like talking back to teachers about things that I thought was wrong or knew was wrong or felt didn't feel right. But yeah, like going through the school, like I remember that I enjoyed, I could tell that it was like good education, and there were certain resources that was cool to be available in Lake Oswego School District. Um, but yeah, as far as like the you know in growing up, I was at least very preoccupied with social shit and just trying to like hang out and have friends and stuff like that. And like I did really well in school, but um or did pretty well. I did very well for the effort that I put in, but there was nobody that was like, I feel like I was just like largely ignored by most of the teachers or whatever. Just kind of, I just floated through, you know.
Yeah, I'm curious with especially when we talk about those experiences with teachers just saying, sound like off the wall stuff, especially when you're like you said, like you're the only person in the class, and it's just yeah, it's a weird position. And then, later on you kind of like get those sometimes you get those tools to kind of like actually respond, do stuff. But
Yeah.
I'm not sure if there's like any moments in particular that like stood out to you.
Um, like it's funny, like honestly, like I was trying to rack my brain before in preparing for this because like my memory of like elementary, middle school, and high school is like gone, like sparse. Like like I don't remember good times or that many bad like specific things. Like I remember all these feelings in like certain moments, but like I have a really hard time like pulling specific moments from like elementary through high school and things. Like I remember there was like I felt like uh you know uh there was a lot of times where teacher like you kind of like people would have a hard time because teachers are in this place of authority and you assume that they know more about everything, but you would know that there'd be certain ideologies that would be sneaking into it, and you'd be like, well, I have to listen to kind of this person who I know is conservative and doesn't necessarily, you know, you just pick up on certain things about just kind of just favoritism, I guess, in the way teachers, encourage students and stuff like that. And Lake Oswego is a very sports focused place. Um, and so like I feel like a lot of the value of like the resources of the education and stuff like kind of gets lost. Maybe it's just more for males or men, that we just kind of like all got stuck on sports and things, but it was kind of like, well, I was like not good enough to be on the level of the kids I was trying to kick it with, but I felt like there was all sorts of other things distracting from like the resources that were actually there for education. But I remember like when I was a senior in high school, this wasn't a thing with my being Asian, but in high school or in like senior year, I was in leadership class, and I remember the junior class was picking a theme for the winter formal dance or something. They were in charge of it, and they picked the theme jungle fever, and nobody knew. I guess nobody knew like the whoever the Miss Brown or whatever was the I think leadership teacher, and she like didn't know that the term had any other kind of had any like she thought it. I don't know what the fuck she thought it was because I was like, and then I called it out, but it wasn't until after they had gotten all this shit printed, like the invitations and all this stuff, and I was like, what is this? Like, what you don't know? Like, what the connotation with this or anything? She's like, oh, I think I know. It's like I'm like, she's like, oh, it's that Spike Lee movie about the guy who delivers pizza, and I was like, no. And they eventually like reluctantly like I think changed it to something. I don't remember what the fuck it was, but they changed it. But like they made me feel like I was fucking weird for just like pointing it out that I'm like, you're an adult, like you were like well into your 50s, like you should know. like this thing. But it was like a lot of this. It was, I don't know. It was just a very, it was a very white centered like point of view from just in broad strokes there, you know. But I'm sure it's probably changed now. While I would, I think that more people of color have moved to like Oswego in the last several years. I don't know. Like I would think there'd be. Is it?
Uh, you know, I don't know about the number. It feels in some ways it feels like it, but yeah, yeah, I gotta look that up just to like in the school. I know in like the schools, like the number of students is up.
Yeah.
I don't know about like full population, but yeah, I mean, even in terms of it's always interesting with like the was it like the dance themes or the was it like Mayfay was the
Yeah.
that was the thing where you know the class always tries to like sneak in some, honestly it's either like race joke or rape joke, like
Yeah. Like,
those were
was it?
always the theme every year. I
What was those sevens? Just a
think
tip or some
our,
shit?
it was like yeah, let it happen.
Yeah.
Oh, '07 just
Just horrible shit. And you're like, but that was like the thing that was the hardest thing to like fucking like to grapple with when you're like, this is the sense of humor of like the people that are popular and stuff is this like is just like, well, you're just saying fucked up shit.
Mhm,
And I'm like,
exactly.
this is it, like this is funny to me, you know. But I don't know. It's very much like a frat bro type of culture that I felt like lingered over the whole thing, the whole time being there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, just to your point about like everything being framed as sort of like a joke, but it's just
Yeah,
like there's no punchline here. It's
yeah.
it's just something offensive. That's it.
Yeah,
You know, and even with the like you talk about like this sort of like frat boy type culture, because I always think about this in terms of just like when people, the title of the program is called Life After the Bubble, but like when any student kind of like just goes outside anywhere and like this is what, if this is what you grow up in, especially if you like, you're like, oh, this is fine, this is hilarious. And then you're just out in the world. It's like that feels like a liability to you,
yeah,
you know?
yeah, yeah. And that's like that's the other part of the bubble where it's like the bubble's not protecting you. It is, if anything, it's just insulating you and keeping you, because the amount of the people, especially, I mean, only the white kids that I would run into after high school, especially if I would see them in Portland, their whole demeanor is way different. Like, people got humbled when they went to college, hopefully. But like just kind of like the different a lot fucking different. Oh, you're doing your music thing. Oh, how's art? This and that. And I'm like, you used to just say racist shit for no fucking reason in PE. And like, I don't have fond memories of you. I'm not excited. And it's like, but they had nothing to ground. But yeah, it's weird that the whole like bubble type of thing with is like, yeah, you're gonna get your ass kicked if you go anywhere outside of like us. You go with that energy, It's
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And I'm saying before, like, again, you're someone I've known of through music, through the arts, through just I mean, I'll just say like as far as on like following you on social media, you've got like independent artist motivation just coming out. But I'm curious as far as like with your interest in the arts, is that something that kind of like came during childhood or
I was always like really into writing and like drawing and stuff when I was younger, and then I feel like as I got into like middle school and like the early years of high school, there was just nobody else that was like that was into that like sports but also was more into the creative side of things, and like none of my friends were really at the time like really into creative stuff. It was more just sports and trying to be cool. And yeah, so I like didn't take any. I don't think I took any art classes till senior year. And like I remember the art teacher that was there. Um, I like the one painting, my first like actual acrylic paint that I finished for the class that like took me hell long to do. I like did it late because I like was trying to figure out this thing, and I like finally did it. I was super proud of it. And then she accused me of like not actually doing the painting, having someone else paint it for me. And I was like, well, that's not it. And then it was like very much, we had like, it seemed like the art program was relatively well funded, but it was very much like if you're not naturally super good at art, uh, or that's like not clearly who you are, like there's no point in taking the art classes or whatever. It was not inviting like at all. Like the art program was not at all inviting. Uh, and like almost, it wasn't until I got out of like senior year and when I took that art one or whatever, like I started to get the materials in my hand and be able to like actually be like, oh, I could just go home and draw if I want to. Like I don't have to be naturally really good. I just can go draw the stuff I want to do. And it wasn't until after I got out of high school and was like, oh, I got a job now. I can go just buy the art supplies and figure it out myself. And like I want to make stuff. I want to learn how to do this and that. I'm gonna go do it myself. Because it was not like encouraged at all. My family was supportive of creative stuff, and my grandfather really got me into creative things. But like in the school, it was like no one's seeking out that potential for like, oh, maybe you're not like a naturally gifted artist, but you're highly creative. What can you do with that? It wasn't any of that type of stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, when it you said like after you got out of school, like what was it that made it like click? Because now you are prolific. So clearly something clearly something
Uh,
changed.
I mean, I feel like I every day I feel like I'm making up for all that time growing up that I wasn't fostering these interests and like exploring, getting skills, like trying to get good at doing this stuff. Like most people that are artists now in their 30s or whatever, they started young and they went to art school or they, had some guidance that, really help guide them that way. And no one really pushed me to start painting or anything like that. And I just fell in love with it. And I used to think that I wanted to do like clothing design as my main thing and shoe design and stuff, which is still in my interest. But I needed to get that expression of like painting and visual art. You can do whatever. And like in Lake Oswego, I felt like so much shit was just like discouraged, like just in a way where it was just like I was already different, so like they they already just didn't get me in any. I didn't find people that are related to that did art either. And so uh I just felt the calling to it, and then in the last fucking 10 years or I've just dedicated my life to it because it's just part of my calling. And a big motivation has been to try to it's like not to get fame, but if another kid who maybe has a similar background comes across my shit, I would think they'd be stoked or something. If like because there's like no fucking Laotian artist that anybody knows about in the US. And at the very least like a rapper or a painter. And I'm sure there are some. I haven't found very many, and most of the, I don't know, Laotian artists out there, rappers, are not very unique. But yeah, it just kind of like not ever having anybody that I could really relate to growing up, like really motivated me to be forward in who I am and like really listen to like what makes me feel good as a person or as an artist. It's just like somebody's got to be the first in for certain things. And while it would have been nice to have like some sort of artist mentor that was looked like me or whatever, just like that wasn't part of it. And uh, you know, there's other kids out there that look like me that are interested in the same shit that, you know, I hope that they can trust themselves to like explore that shit because it's so open ended and like nobody's gonna make you do any of this stuff, especially art.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about that with 'cause yeah, in LO now it's kind of been an ongoing discussion as far as specifically public art and just like the lack of one, just lack of artists of any color represented, lack
Yeah.
of people being depicted, lack of yeah, just lack and all that, but like especially just like there's this emphasis. I think it's kind of yeah, someone who's not like super plugged into the art scene, so I want to put that caveat here.
Yeah.
But it feels like in the Northwest and in places like LO in particular, there's this emphasis on just like kind of how can I put this like sterile nature type
Yeah.
stuff or like just abstract stuff that really doesn't like it doesn't engage people who would be into this stuff or students who don't know they might be into this to
Oh
even
yeah.
like get to that point. So, if you just like had a yeah, I was just thinking about like the opportunities just to like, you know, even just like bring someone like yourself in to like engage with these kids because I imagine the city of Lake Oswego, the school district hasn't reached out about this. I could be
No.
wrong, but
No. And I like, you know, it's I honestly avoid going to the city as
mm,
much as possible. You know, my mom moved back there for a little bit, and when I'd go like visit her, I'd be like just feel mad uncomfortable. And you know, but if they were really trying to consider the futures of their brown students or, you know, underrepresented groups, you know, they would tap in with me or other people because like, you know, I get so excited when you see that spark in people and they're like, oh, I need to play with this, I need to go explore this thing more. And like, you know, everybody has the ability to create art in them, it's just a matter of like what form. And you know, especially in a place like Oswego where you don't feel, if you don't feel like, I didn't feel a sense of community the same way. I have friends but not community. And you know, what I wished, or what, you know, I learned gradually going going through school, and then thankfully the internet when I was able to see more beyond. But you know, it's like uh brown kids in Lake Oswego will spend their whole time trying to be liked by people who won't give a shit about them as soon as they graduate. Who you won't run into these people. You won't, you know, so it like kind of just that because it's such a bubble, it tries to make the world really small and it's just not. And so, you know, like uh anybody can be living in a place that's like, it's your parents are the reason why that you're living in this city. It's not, you didn't choose it, this does not define you. And you know, like even just like when I would start being an artist working in Portland, people would be like, oh, you're from Oswego. Like anytime that would come up, and I'd be like, yeah, okay, I get the burden of all the fucking of the worst of the privileged white people who do not represent me, but I have to take the burden of what they put on the city that I happen to grow up in. And I have to explain, oh, I'm not wealthy, like I don't live on the lake, like I don't have you know, trust fund or silver spoon or any of this stuff. And it's like, I'm like, I have to explain that to people in Portland. And then what they say about Portland is that it's all white people too. And it's like that erasure too. But we're here. And so it's like this, it was like always this shit of like, you know, oh, it's all white people. Well, not all, but you know what we mean. And it's like, well, but what about the fucking people you're skipping over? Like, do they not matter at all? And you know, like growing up, I wish that I would have been that there would have been more teachers that would actively see these other interests that kids had and like be like, oh, you like reading this, or you like, studying this. I know your friends aren't really into this stuff, but like, hey, what if I show you this other thing? It was kind of like they just let people go to their social cliques and whatnot. And that's, you know, that was it. But yeah, the art didn't seem like an option for me till I got out of there. And I was, I didn't want to be inspired by like spite of shit there. I wanted to like be able to find myself, and I felt like I couldn't be myself until I was around people who at least thought like me, and came from different backgrounds and shit. Because like when you're in like Oswego, at least a handful of kids in every class, their parents went to Lake Oswego, and their parents and their parents, like when I was in grade school, there was multiple kids in my class whose dads were in the first class at Forest Hills, and like, and it's all they're forcing them to do the same shit, and then and it's like the world's big, and just because people who are wealthy people tend to not try to do anything after high school because they don't have to, like, it doesn't mean that their friends that are less well off or brown or queer or whatever like are going to have those same experiences after high school. And it's kind of like they kind of cater to them, be like, well, everyone's going to U of O, your parents are going to pay for it, you're not going to worry about the loans, and then you're going to go do real estate, and you know that's it. um I don't know, it's yeah, I felt pretty suffocated creatively there because I just didn't seem like an option. Like, and I didn't know any artists from like Oswego, you know?
Right, right. And I just really resonate with that point as far as like you get all the burdens. Like when you're in LO, you're going through the schools, you're isolated, you're dealing with all this other stuff. You go outside other places where, again, like your white peers, or at least like most of your peers are like not going. So you gotta be like the stand-in for them in all these things. And that's just like, again, like similar to the point as far as like being in the classroom when it's like you don't have all the tools to kind of like contextualize and
Yeah.
navigate this, where you're just like in that position. And especially like socially, it's just, it's straining, I think.
Yeah. And it like a lot of it felt like, your identity was decided for you before you had a chance to establish it. And like, you know, I always felt a strong sense of self inside, and I let it out in ways like how I dress, or certain things that I do in school, to navigate socially. But it wasn't till I got out of like Oswego and like I started working. I only went to OSU for 2 semesters, and I started working at this leather goods company right away, when I was 19, and that like really helped kind of jump me into real world shit, where I'm like, all the people that I see on a daily basis that I'm working with are into design, and they're into this other music, and they're into these things that I'm actually interested in. And I feel like I'm getting something out of talking to them and stuff. And then, there'd be people from high school to be trying to keep in touch. And, I'd be like, we can still be friends, but we have nothing in common in where we're going in the future. And your perspective has not changed at all since then. You went to school 4 years with, you lived with people that you went to high school and grew up with, and they're all like you, and their parents are all like your parents. And then you get in the real world and you don't know really what you're doing. And then now you have to like pretend like don't come from a conservative background or whatever, because now you're around people who aren't afraid of you and don't come from places where they're that outnumbered. And yeah, that's like the weird like us, we like shyness. And it's wild when I've seen like people from like Oswego in like recent years that are younger that are super confident or that like rep Lake Oswego, and I'm like, what? How? How do you pull this off? I'm like, oh, well, there's a factor that changes it, but you know, it's just like that's not something that a black or brown person would be bragging about in any context. And so it's funny when I've seen it used in other ways where I'm like, oh, well, I'm glad that you can own that, but you do look like you're from there. So it makes sense. But good on you, you know,
Yeah, no, I feel that. I mean,
without any specifics, but you know what I mean.
yeah, yeah. I feel like especially now with like just doing like response stuff where I don't know if the word would be repping it, but it's definitely like I don't know, it's a weird like I guess like you just like grow up just being like out. It's like were there all these forces that you again like contextualize later as far as like even like some of these school experience where you're like, oh wow, like this was some adult in a position of power who was trying to like kneecap me for my future in just like a
Yeah,
casual way.
yeah,
And there is some because I'll admit like with myself, there's some level of just like still alive. Like
yeah,
I'm still out here. You didn't do it type way.
yeah.
But that I also might just have like the whole complex around just all the trauma and shit that happened in LO. So
Oh,
that's a whole other thing.
yeah, and I'm sure you know. I know your experience had to have been different ways too. You know,
Yeah.
it's like the non-white experience is not the same across everybody. You know, and and like you know, it's like I'm like also would when I was younger to maybe more so. I was just like ambiguous brown, where they didn't really even know what I was,
Mm.
and so like most of the time I'd be getting that, "What are you?" And then they'd say like there'd be like kids would be like call me Mexican like it would be a diss like that shit never made any sense to me or Chinese, and it would be like there's like these weird there's like the brown cultures that the white people are most comfortable being afraid openly afraid of or what, but like that's not a diss, like the homie's Chinese, the homie's Mexican, what are you what is this, you know? And but they were just grasping at straws, and then you know, for somebody who didn't grow up with brown people in my immediate family, that shit was even more confusing for me, you know, because I'm like, well, you know, I'm Anthony, and I had an interesting uh conversation with my like adoptive father a little while ago where I kind of pointed out this thing that I didn't realize till I was older, but like there was sometime we were playing basketball somewhere with these random kids, and I think it was at like Sports Nation or Club Sport or something, and these kids like asked me what I was, and I just like I don't know what you're talking about. Like, what am I? You know? And then, you know, my adopted father stepped in and said, like, oh, he's Anthony. And like was, you know, very proud of that. And he would tell me that later, you know, he would kind of be proud of that story later and be like, you know, I was established that you are you and not just this. And like, you know, for state testing, he told me to like not to to not select a race on like the bubbles, you know, and like little things where I'm like, is this protecting me to like, if we can choose, like, if white people could pick and choose when they want to identify a race in somebody, but that doesn't change. Like, I'm like, you could, you wouldn't, you didn't know how to raise a Laotian kid or anything like that. It's like you, but that's their solution is to act like it's not we're not there, and it's like that doesn't help at all. But then you want to tout the diversity when it's like convenient, and it still doesn't actually help the minorities, like touting the bragging about the diversity or the things you do for it doesn't actually help us, it just helps relieve some of your guilt. And Lake Oswego is wild in comparison to Portland because the guilt's not really there. Like Portland, the white guilt's overwhelming, and it's like over the top. In Lake Oswego, it's just not there, and you're like, shouldn't you feel bad about this shit? Like, should shouldn't you like, you know, like be be a citizen of the world here? Like,
Uh,
you
you,
know.
you would think, but it's again this weird thing in LO where it's like the main, at least I found, even just this respond time, like the main sort of like lever, at least to get anything moving. It's not like well-being of people, empathy, any of that. It's just like, is LO's reputation going to be tarnished? Oh, we have to do something. A story gets out about the latest story of some a student just being harassed, sometimes in some cases like assaulted in these ways. They're just like, this is very like 1950s, like.
Yeah.
And then it's like, uh-oh, this is someone will come out. I remember, I think when I was it was like a decade ago, maybe a little bit more, when I was working at the scanner, when there was just a student who's getting called the N-word on Twitter by his teammates, and then the superintendent comes out and is like, this does not represent our city. And it's like, no,
Yeah.
that is exactly the LO experience. But then like people rally again, like people will rally around the idea of like, this is not us, we're better than this. And it's just like, or you could try and do something about this
Well,
massive systemic problem.
well, and the thing, the issue I feel like is that they're never forced to confront it unless they get put on blast and makes them look bad. They don't have to confront in all the microaggressions or the day-to-day things. And so like to them, it doesn't mean anything until they're being called racist. And that's the last thing they want, because they're like, well, I don't even think about race. I don't even, and it's like this, like, these kids, they're just born into these bodies and they're trying to fucking learn and have fun and like, explore, and like, it's just, it's too bad because uh there's just, there's so much pageantries and like just bullshit, like just for show, that we almost, it becomes like sarcastic, or like, it's really hard to believe that like any effort is genuine, when it's like, no, you're just trying to like catch up with the times way too late anyways. And the overall things, like the amount of times that like, what, the max line's been blocked from going to Lake Oswego. You can't fucking bus to Lake Oswego easily. We used to like, in high school, I used to take the bus from like Lake Oswego down to Portland to like go try to find sneaker stores and like go try to find cool shit. And I remember it being just, this was the whole day. It was a whole last thing to go not very far. And, and like rumors of dumping the take, homeless people aren't allowed there.
Mm.
There's like, and the beautification of the city, like, yeah, it looks really pretty, but it's not inviting to anybody. And like, you know just strange, that bubble existing so close to a liberal headquarters almost, of the country, of, you know in its perception. But it's kind of like our little fucking little it's a little growth on the side of this progressive city that's like kind of really reflects actually what the underlying mindset of the people in charge in Portland is, and shit is like, they're not that far removed from this. They just have been refiguring their language to not seem like predators. Now they know how to use that language. Like Oswego, they just don't have to sugarcoat shit to still get away with, you know, bullshit and oppression and stuff. And you know, it's, yeah, I like there's just not there wasn't anybody that like spoke up. There wasn't cool white kids that spoke up about anything in high school because it's like they didn't have to, and their dads like, you know, no, just play football.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny you talk about just like traveling because yeah, I hadn't really thought about this until probably this moment. But even when I think about like doing like just basketball training where that a coach was out and working out in Hillsboro, and it's like you take the bus to go over to like Beaverton Transit Center to take the max out there, and like most of that trip, every time, is that bus in
Yeah,
LO back of and just going through that wide world of transit. But
yeah,
yeah, even with the max, because every time it's like, the city you can write what the city council, what's going to be said of the city councilman. It's like they're going to try and bring riffraff into city. They're going to bring down the property values.
yeah.
Even with like affordable housing right now, the big obstacles is people saying, but what about the trees? We like
What about
if
the like? Yeah, 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 you care about the trees for sure.
yeah, only now though, only
Yeah,
now.
no,
Like the business, the trying to bring in like a salt and straw or something, it's
yeah.
fine.
Well, they brought all the businesses from Northwest 23rd to Lake Oswego. They're all there now, so there's no reason for them to even go to Portland anymore. And you could tell right away, like the Bridge and Tunnel shit. But it's just like there's yeah, the it's to keep it. It's like, yeah, the property values, like nobody's selling. Like they don't want to sell their houses. They want to keep their shit forever. That's so there's no risk there. And like it's just like the most obvious fucking classist shit to be against public transportation. It's good for the environment. It saves people money. It's like one of the infrastructures of our country. Like what?
Yeah, yeah. But and yet, just like without fail, every time you can predict it, it is the same. If it's public transportation, if it's affordable housing, it's the same argument. It's the same talking points every time, like you said, because they don't have to have any shame about it. Like
Yeah,
you can just do it.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
There's no yeah there's no coding there. It's just how do we feel about this? Yeah,
right, right. So I want to bring it to music. He's gonna mention just like one, just kind of like carving a path as a Laotian rapper, but like what was it like? Was that similar to like visual art as far as like something you got into really like tail end like post LO, or was it different?
yeah. I mean, I always was really into writing, like poetry and rhymes and stuff. Just but yeah, poetry since I was as early as I could like write. I was just into poetry. I loved wordplay and just sneaking, packing as much as possible into like the fewest amount of words. And then now I just do a ton of words. A ton. It's just super dense now. But I didn't start rapping till I was like 22. Um, so and it was like after I had started taking visual art seriously or more seriously. And it was just happened to be a circumstance where there was a guy that I used to hang out with that had a studio down the street, and he was like, you should read some of your poems over my like sound design sometime." And then I started doing that just for fun, and then uh it just with me, like once something like clicks, I just like go all in and tend to just become like obsessed with it. So I just like I was like, well, I'm pretty much rapping now. There's no point in like me saying words over instrumentals and like pretending like I'm not near that. So um, it kind of just this evolved, and I love music, and it was just another facet of like arm of creativity, and like it feeds off like the visual art and the music, like they all intertwine and feed off each other. And if I go too hard in one thing, I always know I can like take a break on that and focus on this other medium that I like, and I'm still getting these ideas out and feeling like I'm processing inspiration, and it's just in different forms. So it's all about just trying to like give myself more options and not be limited in my expression. I think probably part of not feeling like I could express myself growing up. Now I'm like trying to express myself in every way possible, in every language, every form that, sparks something interesting to me, But music was late, and I felt like I needed a few years of being myself as an adult before I started like rapping and, sharing my thoughts with the world in that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, and just kind of give people who may not be familiar just the idea, like, and we kind of like talk about like just like the prolificness, but like it feels like just in like just following you, like you have like several different projects, like even just like musically going on at like one time at any given time. But you just talk
Yeah.
a little bit about that.
Well, I've released 40 musical projects since I started in 2013, or since my first release in 2013. Um, and I have 7 albums that I'm working on right now. Only one of which is like a solo project that's just me, and then the other ones are all collaborative projects. So um, I'm a big on trying on being a catalyst to like creativity with my friends and other, all the people that I hang out with now. Pretty much all are artists in one way or another. But when people come over, when I hang out with people, we're making music. We're like every time my homie Slicker Fees comes over, we make 2 songs, and it's like that's just built into our habits. And so, I found people that get the same enjoyment out of creating as I do, and we can collaborate easily. And so because of that, I'm like the potential is endless for like creating stuff when you're like around people that you can work with and build, learn from and stuff. So I'm just like, after the last 10 years of focusing on this, like, best thing about it is I like know the people I work well with. And so, I can make stuff fast, and I can always like make something, and yeah, just to keep up with the ideas that are, you know, going through my head, just to like feel okay, this, I guess, yeah. It's very my coping mechanisms also like my strength, so kind of works out in funny ways.
And from a just like a music fan standpoint, I'm curious if you had a similar experience as far as like specifically how like LO kids like engaged with like rap music in terms of like the way I always think about I think it was when I was in college when it's like the Dougie was like a big thing. And I remember just seeing it on like Regis and Kelly, like after, what was it, like, however, it was like 6 months to 2 years after a song came out and a few months after like it hit, like college campuses and stuff like that. But I always thought about LO similarly like that. It's always, there's like a 6 month to like 2 year lag.
Yeah.
Like I remember, like after, what was it, like, yeah, when I was in, I want to say like eighth grade, and just like being in LO again, you're just like behind in general, but I was also in this like rites of passage program. So that's like where Mac Dre came on my radar years after, anyone else outside of like places like LO. And then I
Yeah.
remember like 2 years later when they found Mac Dre in LO high school. And it's just a very interesting experience of my fellow white students post that.
Well, he has that song with Something Terrible, Debo, that everybody knows. That's just about Robin, like Oswego to Montego, and it's fucking tight. Because I think Something Terrible used to like live in Westland, but it's like, I know every Mac Dre bar where he references like something in the Portland suburbs. He talks about the Blue Dolphin on McLaughlin. The something you should know. There's like I stay I stay in Westland. That's where my dad lives, or something like that. And it's like there's like funny ass things, and I remember being like, well, that's my favorite rapper, and he was here, so at least that's he passed through here. he did what I would hope anybody from outside would do coming to Lake Oswego. But no, that yeah, that and like, Andre Nicotina definitely like stepped into it. But there was funny because it was like there'd be people that would be like, yeah, I like this music or whatever because I hear it, but I could tell that like I was obsessing over the shit more than the people around me were like, I was like, I'm printing out the lyrics, I'm matching the shit up. This, I was like, that's not the trying to correct like azlyrics.com and stuff. Be like, that's not right. You could hear, but yeah, I don't know. It's just all these it's just maybe personality or whatever, but just yeah, the shit just like I connected with the music and stuff like a lot more than I felt like my peers did. And it was my little secret. I don't know, not necessarily secret, but it was just something that I could have a personal relationship. I could load up my little iPod or it wasn't an iPod, it was some bootleg MP3 player thing, like there's a USB stick. I could load that up with whatever, and these were my songs and stuff, and I listened to it over and over again, and it like, you think about world outside of the bubble. That was music definitely like kind of one of the first things to like expose to outside of that shit.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Um, yeah, we kind of feel like we talked about, especially through like the arts and music in this conversation, but I did want to return to a thing you said earlier, specifically in terms of just like not knowing what community was, at least until you left. And I was
yeah.
curious if you had any more kind of like just thoughts on that particular sentiment.
Yeah, I mean, like the biggest thing that I learned kind of from just being around a bunch of different people since high school and all that is just like you attract people based off of how you carry yourself and who you are. And there are people that will have different backgrounds that will appreciate that because or appreciate you for who you are because they've been around other people. And when you're stuck in a bubble like Oswego, where most of the people haven't been around much other people, they've been in this bubble for so long, they don't see the value in like encouraging what makes each person unique and the strengths of people's personalities. They don't see like the value in like having a homie that does art and a homie that is really good at basketball, or whatever. It's like and that you know community takes like uh uh action, like being proactive and wanting to participate in that. It's not just your peers like the people that just happen to live near you. It's the people who are actively engaged in life to an extent that you are, and at least engaging in similar parts of life. That's what I feel like in community. And um yeah, like uh my friends now and the people I spend time with now are from all over the place. And a few people grew up in Portland and then people from New York, LA, the Bay and shit. And it's like, once I got exposed to people from other places and realized that like, oh, these people I get along with these people not only better, but they don't give a shit where I'm from. They want to know who I am now. And like I think that, and not having people that look like me around me made things confusing for a bit, but I, kind of get forced to focus on like just humanity, like what makes you a person, and like, having those conversations with people. And like, it's just easy to tell the people that are interested in shit outside of themselves and what's easy and not. And those are the people that I consider in my community. Um, people that will buy art from me, I'll buy something else that they do. It's like that there's a mutual appreciation and respect. And you're not always going to get that just where you're born into. As hard as you try to be liked by other people or do these other things, it's just like, um, you can't really participate in the community till you are yourself and doing your role and being your playing your part. And that's like a thing that I kind of am trying to, or I've is very important in my pursuit of art and stuff. Is like I have to be me because there's not a lot of other people with like the same recipe that are existing, and that just in general I have to be me to the full extent, because um any watering down is just letting all the shit that held me back win, and so yeah, that's, I don't know.
I feel that. Usually I like to end these with like asking for, what kind of advice you might offer to students. Although I will say that sounds like kind of like a gem there. Although if you want to add something else, I'm more than welcome. But I'd also just ask, like, in terms of kind of like people doing equity, DEI, kind of like the work around sort of like everything we're just talking about, as far as trying to be more supportive, create a just create a more supportive environment, or at least create an environment where, yeah, just various different like students of color who are in LO can at least kind of trying to think of a nicer way to say this would just be, a little less fucked up by some of the stuff that goes on. Uh yeah, you have any thoughts, advice, insights on that you'd like to share before we wrap it up?
um I would say just like, don't hold back on anything that you're interested in. Like, don't let anybody tell you that anything you're fascinated by is like stupid, or that how much something pays you should never dictate whether or not you pursue it. Because in any field there is um a pay range that will pay you enough to live. And if things are worth it, you'll make the sacrifices. Art is not an easy thing to like survive off of full time, but it's what makes me feel good, and it's what I feel like is my calling and my passion. I have good months, I have bad months, money wise, but um, you can't let all these other things that are out of your control dictate your like happiness and well-being. Like, it's like really, with Lake Oswego being a bubble, the lack of exposure and the ignorance or the arrogance that kind of clouds that city is like, they're scared of other stuff. So just fucking do your shit and see what happens. Like what are they going to do now? And if anything, right now, if anybody fucking does anything out of pocket, we are way more in a position to put them on blast and get justice or whatever. But it's like, just let it let it hang and just start now being yourself, and don't wait till you get out of high school, out of the bubble, to start figuring yourself out. And I mean, younger generations, they're a lot more exposed to things, and you know comfortable with that stuff. But yeah, my advice is just that, like, high school is only 4 years, and the whole rest of your life you have a responsibility to like be yourself, whatever that looks like. And like, you are going to not get along with people if you're not yourself, and people are not going to respect you if you're not yourself. And like, but anything worth doing is like just going to take time and sacrifice, and like, you actually have to love what you do to like get that back. um but just like, don't waste any time, you know.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah, Tron, thank you again for taking the time today and just
Oh,
being,
thank you.
yeah, just being so candid with it all. Because I think, I just think it's important, especially for young people in here. Like, like that message is just like, don't wait till after high school just to like start finding yourself. Like, I really wish more people had told me that,
Yeah.
while I was coming up. So yeah, again,
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't have an older brother, nothing like that. So it's just all figuring out on the way. But yeah, I really appreciate you talking with me, and like, yeah, it was good to actually get a conversation in and stuff. And yeah, happy to talk, especially about this kind of shit anytime, even off record, man. Um, but yeah, I appreciate it. You're doing good work. That's awesome.
no, thank you. I appreciate that. And yeah, yeah, no, definitely. This conversations to be continued. Hopefully, more, and especially when we're talk about art stuff. We can talk about that offline. But yeah, yeah, Tron, thank you again for taking the time, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.